If you wanna get serious in making pizza using preferments like Biga and Poolish, you want this question from Ariane answered. And I'm very glad that I have the opportunity to answer this question because, as you will see shortly, Biga and Poolish are very different, even if they have something in common. So thanks, Ariane, for your question. Let's start with, in fact, what they have in common. I isolated at least 3 elements that they have in common. First of all, of course, they are all preferments, but that's not part of the story. The first thing that they have in common is that they use only 3 ingredients, which are flour, yeast, possibly fresh yeast in my opinion, and then water. Second aspect is that they are preferments, as we said before. It means that you have to prepare them in advance. But it also means that you need to keep this in consideration when you are preparing the recipe, because part of the ingredients of the recipe are going into the preferments. Third element that they have in common, you need to really take care of the temperatures. When you start digging into this topic, you will see that both Biga and Poolish require you to take care of the temperatures when needing or when preparing the preferment, because you want to finish to prepare the preferment at a specific temperature, but also the fermentation happens at a specific temperature, which of course is different between Biga and Poolish. And now let's try to isolate what do they have different, starting with Biga. So first of all, Biga has a completely different management. Normally Biga is a mix of flour, water at 45 or 44% on the flour, so this is the hydration that you expect from Biga. It has 1% of yeast, and it can be matured in between 16 hours and 48 hours, but even there are some situations where you can push the fermentation to 72 hours. So it's a very standardized process, I would say, for Biga. The other difference is for Biga that you use strong flour. What do we mean by strong flour? We mean a flour that has a high amount of proteins and specifically a high amount of gluten, because as you remember, proteins are always 2. And the way that we normally have to work with Biga is to find a flour that has a W value of at least 300. Now, I know that not everybody has access to this value, but if you use technical flours, you want to find what is the W value. And again, for Biga, you need the W value that is over 300. And to conclude, for Biga, what Biga brings to your pizza dough, or in reality to every dough that you prepare, it brings of course shelf life, so you have a product that can stay longer before you eat it, and it helps a lot in having a much airy crust. A lot of bakers will tell that Biga is pushing to the dough, so it's pushing the dough to grow. Moving to Poolish, Poolish is different first of all for the amount of ingredients that it's using. Because you have a 100% hydration. It means that for 1 kilo of flour in Poolish you have 1 liter or 1 kilo of water. And also the other big difference is that in Biga you have a fixed amount of yeast. In Poolish you don't have a fixed amount of yeast, but you have a certain percentage of yeast that you can use depending on how much you want the Poolish to ferment. And this is an important difference, because Poolish can be created in just a couple of hours and it's ready, or you can push it for several hours. Generally, the bakers prefer to push Poolish at a longer fermentation, at least 12 hours. But it's a matter of preference. You can definitely have a Poolish that is shorter in fermentation. We didn't talk too much about temperatures for Biga fermentation. However, for Poolish fermentation, the temperatures are a bit different. You want to ferment at 20-22 Celsius degrees. So it's a little bit more complicated to manage from temperatures point of view, unless you have a place in your apartment or in the place where you are working that has exactly this temperature. Probably where Poolish is a little bit easier is in the management. First of all, to identify when Poolish is ready is pretty easy. You need to wait that it grows, and then you will find a kind of a hole in the middle of the fermentation, and that means that it's collapsing and therefore it's ready. Also, it can be prepared by hands. Actually, it's recommended to be prepared by hands. because if you think about preparing it in a spiral mixer, for example, you need to consider that when you prepare Polish, then you cannot remove it from the place where you created it because it's liquid, so it's very hard to move it from the bowl where you are preparing the remaining ingredients. And in general, it's a bit easier to manage, like in general, so it's not creating too much complication in the final dough. For example, to give you a little bit of a hint, Biga is bringing a lot of tenacity to the final pizza dough, while Polish is actually not having this tenacity, and I guess that this is one of the reasons why some bakers or some pizza makers prefer to use Polish instead of Biga in the Neapolitan pizza style, where you need to have a kind of a good amount of elasticity, or better, of extensibility, not elasticity. One more important information about Polish is that, differently than Biga, you don't necessarily need to have a high gluten flour, so not strong flour with a higher W, but you can have one that is less with less strong, we say, so with a W value that is lower than 300. That's no issue with that. Finally, the effects. While Biga is creating a lot of airy crust, Polish is doing the same, but in a much lower grade, I would say. But it also helps, like Biga, in the shelf life for your pizza. Last but not least, how much Biga and Polish you want to use in a pizza dough? You don't have really an answer for this, because it depends on the pizza style that you are making. We have people that are recommending in Neapolitan style pizza not to use more than 20-25% of Biga, for example, but we have some people making professional pizza that are using even 100% of Biga. And in general, you can use more Biga, for example, in a pizza in the sheet tray. The same goes for Polish. It really depends on the pizza style that you are making. You can use more or less of it. Of course, you don't normally use 100% Polish to make whatever pizza style. Last information before we close this video, one challenge that a lot of people are having when using Biga or Polish is to understand that the amount of ingredients that you use in these preferments have to be removed from the final amount of ingredients that you have for your pizza dough. I hope I was clear enough, and I hope that I gave you enough details to understand what are the real differences between these two amazing preferments. And follow for more pizza tips, and you're welcome.